good morning. Welcome.
Good morning, Barry.
We'll start with the Mel Brough matter. Are you satisfied there has been no collusion between the Liberal Party or any of its members and James Ashby over the Peter Slipper matter?
Well, the fundamental issue here is the alleged sexual harassment of a member of staff by the Speaker of the Australian Parliament. I've been listening carefully to the debate. I'm appalled at the more recent comments from the Foreign Minister that suggest that or seek to discredit the complainant. And frankly, when there is an allegation of sexual harassment, it should be left to the courts without all of this speculation around it and any attempts to try and intimidate the staffer that is making the complaint.
It is in a political arena, though, and sometimes these things are treated differently. The query is because...
Well, they shouldn't be, Barry. They shouldn't be. It is a very serious issue, and frankly, I'm quite appalled at the debate that's going on at the moment, trying to treat this guy as a political football. It's got to stop. I wonder if it would have been a bit different if he was female making the allegation against a male. It doesn't matter whether you're male or female. Where there's sexual harassment in the workplace, it needs to be dealt with by the police and by the courts, and that's where it should stay.
Why do you suppose it is that whenever Christopher Pyne and Tony Abbott are asked about this, they use that term, no specific knowledge? Does that imply that they have some general knowledge?
No, I'm not going to speculate. I'm not going to join in the discussion on this matter. If there is any insinuation or any suggestion of a conspiracy, it will inevitably appear before the courts. It'll be used as evidence, or they'll call people as witnesses. I'm not going to join in what is an attempt to try and harass someone making a complaint about sexual harassment against the Speaker of the House of Representatives. I'm not going to do it.
All right, let's talk about the budget. And if the government, the Treasurer, on Tuesday announces a surplus, presumably you intend to say that it's not real.
Well, all he'll be doing is promising a surplus. This year, he promised originally a deficit of $12 billion, then it became a deficit of $22 billion, then a deficit of $37 billion. The year hasn't finished. We fully expect it's going to be a deficit somewhere in the mid-40s. So if Wayne Swan promises a surplus on Tuesday night, there's two things you need to know. Firstly, look at the deterioration of around $30 billion in the current year, which undermines the credibility of the claim. And the second thing is, does anyone anywhere believe that Julia Gillard and Wayne Swan are still going to be there in September next year to claim finally they've delivered a surplus? I mean, this is the point. Whatever they claim on Tuesday night is flawed because no one believes, including members of the Labor Party, that Wayne Swan and Julia Gillard are going to be there to actually have to deliver it.
So you're convinced? You say there's no chance the government can win the next election?
No, it's the Labor Party that's speculating on their own leadership. They're the people that say they're going to have to change the guard. I mean, this is not coming from us, it's coming from members of the Labor Party. So if members of the Parliamentary Labor Party do not believe that their own Treasurer and their own Prime Minister is going to be there for the duration of the budget, well, how can anyone else believe it?
You've also said that most of the revenue raised will come from higher taxes and not spending cuts, but now you know the size of the cuts they plan to make in the defence budget. Do you want to revise that assertion?
No, because the fiscal consolidation that the government is going to claim on Tuesday night will be going from a deficit in the current year of around $45 billion to a surplus next year of somewhere between $1 and $3 billion. Now, that $48 billion turnaround, I assure you, is not going to come from the government cutting back on expenditure. In fact, what we have seen over the last few days, and we have witnessed today, is a government entirely confused about the message of the budget. On the one hand, they say it's going to be a tough budget. They're going to have to make hard decisions about cutbacks. But on the other hand, they're making massive new spending commitments, including substantive changes to the payments to parents of school children.
Yeah, we'll get to that one in a moment. But just further on defence, by delaying for 2 years the purchase of the Joint Strike Fighters, just a two-year delay saves, they say, $1.6 billion. Now, how would that put Australia's security at risk. Why is that not a good idea?
Well, fundamentally, if the fighter is available, it's the best and it is the best available equipment, you would obviously say that it is going to affect our frontline defence, because to give your troops the very best in the battlefield, you need to have the very best equipment faster than your enemy. So, as a number of ex-senior military figures have said, these sorts of decisions do affect the frontline activities. And even though Julia Gillard and Wayne Swan say it won't.
But it does seem to be a big saving, though, for not very much lost. Your intention, though, is fair to say, isn't it, to not reduce expenditure on defence, but instead to increase it?
Well, what you'll see at the next election are all of our details, and this is a challenge we have, Barry. There are, as of today, 2 scheduled budgets before the next election. Now, given the numbers I just told you about the current financial year, Lord knows what we're going to have to use as a starting base for our commitments at the next election, because the numbers that the government keeps announcing are very different when they're actually delivered. But
Senator David Johnson, who's the Shadow Minister for Defence, has said that in terms of defence funding, it's going in the wrong direction. Now, there's only one way to interpret that. He is saying that you will spend more money on defence, not less.
I'm not going to get into speculation about what might be in our election commitments. You'll see our commitments in full, Barry.
But he has said that, and he is the Shadow Minister for Defence.
Well, he is disturbed about the cuts to frontline activities. And look, we've already flagged that there will be cuts in areas such as defence materiel, which is the procurement arm of defence. But we are very committed to giving our troops the very best weaponry and the very best support, and that's what I'm sure David Johnson was referring to.
Well, you mentioned the education initiative. What do you make of that?
Well, it's a money shuffle. The government clearly is desperately trying to increase expenditure in the current financial year, reduce expenditure next year so that it can claim to get a surplus. And the year after, it's got a pipeline of big new expenditure coming. That's the first thing. But the second thing is, everyone in politics knows that this payment is about the carbon tax. It is about the fact that the government has no way at the moment of unwinding the carbon tax, and they're making life harder and not easier for everyday Australians. So this has got nothing to do with education and everything to do with the carbon tax and the fact that people are about to be hit with a great big whack on their cost of living expenses.
But if you've got kids at school and you're eligible, you'd prefer it to be paid straight into your bank account, wouldn't you, rather than going through the tedium of collecting all the receipts? Well,
it's meant to be for school. It's meant to be for school, and the government's taking that out and saying, look, whether you claim the money or not, you're going to get it. Now, this is entirely linked to the carbon tax. The Labor Party is panicking about the impact of the carbon tax on everyday Australians, and they're trying to give people a sugar hit with an upfront payment, but the bottom line is, long after that upfront payment is gone, the carbon tax will be there and it will continue to increase electricity prices.
Well, they're not all sugar hits. They've also announced that all single unemployed parents will lose payments when their child turns 8, previously 16. Now, in the new age of entitlements that you've talked about, where entitlements should be more carefully scrutinised, do you support that initiative?
Well, we want to see the details of it. But as Tony Abbott said, and as I said previously, we want to get people from welfare into work. The interesting thing is, Barry, this doesn't start, as I understand it, although there were conflicting reports, this doesn't start until the 1st of July 2013. So if the government really was making this a savings measure, it would start it on the 1st of July 2012. But obviously, this is part of the charade of the budget and confused message of the budget.
Have you yet decided, with your own costings, how you'll have those costings audited and authenticated before the next election?
Yes, we have.
And how will you do it?
You'll see.
Why will you not share that now with the public, given the experience you had at the last election?
Well, I've got to finally consult with my colleagues, but I tell you, all of our policies, if an election's called tomorrow, all of our policies for that election are fully costed, fully funded. If an election's called in 12 months or in 17 months, God forbid, then all of our policies will be fully costed and fully funded.
But the last time around, the accountancy firm that you used, it was found that they breached professional standards. They were fined and reprimanded. This time, will you guarantee it will be a genuine audit?
Well, an audit is obviously a broad term. In accounting senses, you have audits of companies, but audit with a small a, which is what I was referring to, is about ensuring that we can verify that our numbers are accurate. We have gone to more extreme lengths on this matter, Barry, than any opposition in history. In fact, we went further than the government. We released our numbers before the last election on the Wednesday before the poll. The government, and we had a press conference, we were held to scrutiny in those days, the government, Wayne Swan, released his numbers by press release on Friday afternoon before the next polling day. That's what they also did in 2007.
But you didn't
go
further.
So we will be held.
What you said last time, you specifically said to the accountancy firm that what their work should not be of an audit nature. Now, I presume that this time around you're saying that won't be the case. You'll be asking an accountancy firm, a reputable one, to look at this and say this must be a genuine audit, small a or large a. It must be a genuine audit.
Barry, our numbers will be accurate. Our numbers will be verified. We will go to the next election with fully costed, fully funded policies. I just make one further point. The government's been daring us to put our policies to a parliamentary budget office. Like everything else, the government promised that a year and a half ago. They said it would be implemented by now. There is no parliamentary budget office. They even allocated money to it, but they haven't set it up. So they're not making life easier, they're making life harder. And they don't want to be held up to proper scrutiny. And I'd say to you, we will be providing, I'll say it again, we'll provide at the next election fully costed, fully funded policies.
And when will the public know the nature of that audit that you're seeking? Will they know that well in advance or only at the time that that the election is called?
You'll see it all, Barry.
But at what point? At what point will you explain the process?
Well, you tell me when the election is. Barry,
so you won't explain the process.
The
I'm not talking about your numbers and your costings. When will you explain the process that you'll then expose these figures to?
Well, before the next election.
And not until...
I want to know, Barry, for example, whether the Parliamentary Budget Office is up and running before the next election. Can you answer that?
OK, just on one...
Well, no, hang on. Can you answer that, Barry? Can you answer whether the Parliamentary Budget Office is going to be up and running before the next election?
No, but...
Because we want to submit policies to it. In addition to other services, we want to submit policies to it for costing. So you're asking me a question at the moment that I can't answer because the government is not being helpful at all.
I just want to ask you finally on the GST arrangements. Are you apparently seriously considering a per capita approach to the distribution of GST revenue?
What we're waiting for is the final Greiner review, which the government initiated in relation to the GST. And we'll make a statement, like the government will, after that final review is delivered.
Well, when Tony Abbott was in Western Australia, he said he would seriously consider a per capita arrangement, and that, of course, would hit some states very hard. And then when he got to Tasmania, he said that he would not shortchange them. So is it a serious consideration of a per capita arrangement or not?
Well, I think the challenge with the GST is, and I understand, and we have said previously on numerous occasions, that we are sympathetic to the plight of Western Australia, which has very significant structural challenges. More than 1,000 people are moving to Western Australia every week, and that creates major challenges for their local economy. But we're also mindful that the GST pool is not going to be broadened under us. The revenue is flatlining, in some cases even falling below expectations. We want to have a constructive relationship with all the states, and states are not going to be worse off under the distribution of the GST under us.
Joe Hoggie, thanks for your time.
Thanks very much, Barry.